بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين حمدا يوافي نعمه ويكافئ مزيدا يا ربنا لك الحمد كما ينبغي لجلال وجهك ولعظيم سلطانك سبحانك لا نحصي ثناء عليك أنت كما أثنيت على نفسك فلك الحمد حتى ترضى ولك الحمد إذا رضيت ولك الحمد بعد الرضا اللهم صل وسلم على سيدنا محمد في الأولين وصل وسلم على سيدنا محمد في الآخرين وصل وسلم على سيدنا محمد في كل وقت وحين وصل وسلم على سيدنا محمد في الملأ الأعلى إلى يوم الدين وصل وسلم على سيدنا محمد حتى تلف الأرض ومن عليها أنت خير الوارثين نويت تعلم وتعليم وتذكر وتذكير ونفع انتفاع والإفادة والاستفادة والحث على تمسك بكتاب الله وبسنة رسوله صلى الله عليه وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم ودعاء الهدى ودلالة على الخير ابتغاء وجه الله ومرضاته وقربه وثوابه سبحانه وتعالى. قال إمام محمد بن إسماعيل البخاري رحمه الله تعالى ونفعنا بي وبكم في الدارين آمين. باب قول النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم أن أعلمكم بالله وأن المعرفة فعل القلب لقوله تعالى ولكن يؤاخذكم بما كسبت قلوبكم. وبإليه قال حدثنا محمد بن سلام قال أخبرنا عبدة بن هشام عن أبيه عن عائشة رضي الله تعالى عنها قالت كان رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم إذا أمرهم بالأعمال بما يطيقون قالوا إنا لسنا كهيئتك يا رسول الله إن الله قد غفر لك ما تقدم من ذنبك وما تأخر فيغضب حتى يعرف الغضب في وجهه ثم يقول إن أتقاكم وأعلمكم بالله أنا.
The statement of the Prophet ﷺ, may the prayers and peace of God be upon him. I am the most knowledgeable of you in relation to God. And Gnosis is an act of the heart due to the statement of God, exalted be He. However, He will not hold you responsible for that which your hearts acquired. Muhammad ibn Salam al-Bikandi related to us saying, Abdah informed us on the authority of Hisham, on the authority of his father, on the authority of Aisha, who said, whenever the Messenger of God ﷺ, may the prayers and peace of God be upon him, used to command them, he used to command them with acts that they were capable of. They said, O Messenger of God, verily we are not of your type. Verily God has forgiven you for your preceding and succeeding sins. He thereby became angry, such that anger could be discerned in his face. He thereafter said, verily I am more conscious and more knowledgeable of God than you all.
This is the 13th chapter of Kitaab al Imaan of the Book of Faith. Imam Al Bukhari rahimahullah ta'ala, he entitles the actual chapter about Qawl al-Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam ana a'lamukum billah, and he based it on the statement of the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam that we're going to embrace inshallah ta'ala, that I am the most knowledgeable of all yous with regards to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And obviously Imam Al Bukhari rahimahullah ta'ala, he wants to sort of extrapolate from that title again his broader theme of what the different degrees of faith. Again, once again, that faith increases and decreases, decreases either the people of different degrees as it relates to the faith of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, such that the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam here, as it can be translated, I am the most knowledgeable of all of you as it relates to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and so thereby there are different degrees of knowledge as it relates to Him jalla jalaluhu wa ta'ala, saying that the reality is that the knowledge that the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam has of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is incomparable to anybody else. I hear a'lam, yani for lughat al-Arab, like Imam Ibn Malik rahimahullah ta'ala in his Alfiya, it's not always a superlative, it's not always a comparison here, yani more knowledgeable than. So when like Allah ta'ala, Allahu Akbar, it's not that Allah ta'ala is greater than, because there's nothing in comparison to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as it relates to his kibriya. And likewise also with the Rasul sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam, there's nothing in comparison that you can compare with the knowledge that the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam has of Allah jalla jalaluhu wa ta'ala. And so here it's about the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam supremacy in terms of knowledge, but you can also understand that as Imam Al Bukhari rahimahullah ta'ala wants degrees as it relates to faith in and of itself. radiallahu ta'ala anhu warda. And then he continues in his title, وَأَنَّ الْمَعْرِفَةَ فِعْلُ الْقَلْبِ. And then he wants to speak about the term in the Arabic language, ma'rifa in the Arabic language. And the basis of the term, no doubt there's an indication which we can embrace if we were speaking in the context of theology, but also there's a different type of connotation that you embrace as it relates, for instance, in the science of theology. And so, al-ma'rifa, according to the theologians, is Imaan. It is faith. It's muradif for faith. And so when the term ma'rifa is used, it can mean, ma'rifa here means faith, yani your Imaan. Okay, your theology in that regard, radiallahu anhu warda. And that's why, of the great Imams, radiallahu anhu warda, of the last generation, Sheikh Abdul Karim al-Rifa'i, radiallahu ta'ala anhu warda, in his work in theology, he called it al-ma'rifa, his great work in theology, which is a mukhtasar, Imam Al Bukhari, rahimahullah ta'ala, Imam Al Bayjuri, Ibrahim Al Bayjuri, rahimahullah ta'ala's commentary upon what? Upon the Imam Al Laqani's work, Jawhar al-Tawheed, radiallahu ta'ala anhu warda. Our point is that the term ma'rifa can be employed in a theological sense, okay, for i'tiqad, what we believe, okay? But it also has a meaning that relates to spirituality, okay? Which here is most of how it's been translated, Gnosis, which is experiential knowledge of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And Allah ta'ala alam, but that would quote unquote be more fitting in terms of the hadith that preceded. Because of the hadith that preceded, the ultimate meaning of the hadith relates to khalwa and uzla. And yufirru, yani bidinihi min al-fitan. As the Prophet ﷺ, he flees from tribulation with his religion. And so what the tradition, obviously the previous tradition we looked at today, Asran, what is the tradition that relates to the slave going into a state of uzla, seclusion. And that then, as we know, inshallah, tabarakallah, it's quote unquote, regardless of fitna. Meaning from the deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is to seclude yourself from creation regardless of fitna. It just that it becomes akad, waqad yajib, and it can become wajib if it's in a state of fitna and that your religion is under threat. The Imams radiallahu anhum wardahum, when they speak about, Imam Al Ghazali and others, when they speak about the enemies of the human being, and they speak about 4 enemies that we must wage war against. The first of them, the weakest of them, shaitan, the devil himself. But Allah Ta'ala tells us about the devil, inna kayda shaitan kana da'ifa, that the actual kayd, the strategy of the devil is weak. And so combating the devil is pretty straightforward. Dhikr Allah, through dhikr, hakada. That's the silah, that's the weapon you wield against the devil, yani, dhikr. Then we speak about the dunya. No doubt in our durus we touched upon the issue of the dunya being the second mortal enemy, stronger than the devil, the dunya. The weapon you wield against the dunya, zuhud. That's zuhud, aestheticism, is had for dunya. You just reject it. The third of them, which is what is concerned here, khalq, creation. And so creation, we make creation here human beings. Human beings are an enemy to human beings. And what it means by enemy here, they prevent you from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They come between you and your Lord subhanahu wa ta'ala, yasuddun an sabilillah. They prevent you on the path of Allah jalla jalaluhu wa ta'ala. What is the weapon you wield here? Uzla. That's the point. Uzla. Seclusion. That is the weapon, the necessary weapon, the only weapon that you can wield against human beings, i.e. to remove yourself from their midst. And then the last, the most mortal of them, the nafs. The nafs is the fourth, the greatest enemy. As the Rasul sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam, he said, "A'dal adawi ma bayna jambayka," that your greatest and most avowed enemy is the one that lies between your 2 sides. And the weapon you wield there, mukhalifatuh, is to contradict it in the absolute sense. As Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, أَمَا مَنْ خَافَ مَقَامَ رَبِّهِ وَنَهَى النَّفْسَ عَنِ الْهَوَى فَإِنَّ الْجَنَّةَ هِيَ الْمَأْوَى. As for the one who fears standing in front of Allah Ta'ala, or who fears the station of the Lord, Jalla fil Ula, whichever way you understand the verse, يعني وَنَهَى النَّفْسَ عَنِ الْهَوَى, and they prevent their nafs from its desire, from that which it loves, فَإِنَّ الْجَنَّةَ هِيَ الْمَأْوَى. Allah Ta'ala says paradise then thereby becomes its natural inclination. Okay, but it's the third enemy, khalwa, which is very, very important. As we mentioned, nobody's khalwa uzla. Nobody reaches Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, say that they must traverse through that reality, mashallah, tabarakallah. Have to traverse through that reality. It's like the Imams, which this all relates to ma'rifah, but in the spiritual sense. That's why the Imams, Wardahum, where they say that the spiritual path, that there are 4 cornerstones of the spiritual path, and it relates to paucity. And these are sort of basic things we should always bear in mind when we're trying to clean up our act. And so they say, radiallahu anhum, wardahum, qillat al-anam, qillat al-alam. You need very few people inside of your life. You need, the relationships you must have in life are those that are necessary, necessary to have. Over and above that, nah, you do not need people in your life. They will prevent you, very least they will slow you down on your path to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so you need qillat al-anam. And so when you have very few people inside of your life, this is uzla, you're in a state of seclusion, you're removing yourself from people, then thereby it becomes issues of qillat al-kalam. You're going to speak little because you've got no one to speak to. Okay, you're going to have qillatul ta'am. You're going to eat little, because khalas, you're engaging people, and you're going to have qillatul manam. You're going to have very little sleep. Hakada, the nature of khalwa. We say these 4 things, they're the cornerstones of the spiritual path. Nobody reaches Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala by, hanging out with the lads. Sorry, that's not how they reach Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Nobody reaches Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with this, just khalas on a constant roll. La, don't. Yaqul khayran aw liyasmut. As the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam says, speak good or shh. Keep silent. He says, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, al-mu'akhadun bima natakallamu bih. Are we going to be taken to account for what we say? Thakullatka ummuka ya Mu'adh. May your mother be bereaved of your Mu'adh. Yakubbu nas ala wujuhihim ala manakhirihim illa hasaidu alsinatihim. He says, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, people cast into hell upon their faces or their noses, save due to what their tongues harvest. You're not going to reach Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala scranning. Often, man, scratching ta'ab. You're not going to reach Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Sayyidina Aisha radiallahu anha wardaha in the Musnad of Ahmad, when she speaks about the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, that the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, his statement, that the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam had a profound love of 3 things. He had a profound love of women. He had a profound love of perfume, Aisha's statement, and he had a profound love of food. He took his fill of women and of perfume, but not of food. Hakada, she says, radiallahu anha wardaha, that although the Rasul sallallahu alayhi wa sallam inclination towards food, because food, we can reduce it to the issue of the ni'am from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, ni'mah from Allah, isn't it? If Allah Ta'ala withheld food, we'd be in problems, we'd be in trouble. And so food in and of itself, mashallah, ni'mah. And it's from that perspective the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam likes food, in that it's a ni'mah min Allah and mun'im subhanahu wa ta'ala. But the Prophet only took what was necessary from it. And so uzla, khalwa, very, very important, really, really important. And we are held back by people. And we need to what? To sort of release the shackles of people, from ourselves, and then thereby, as Allah Ta'ala says, فَفِرُّوا إِلَى اللَّهِ, and thereby to flee unto Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so ma'rifah, as we said in khalwa and uzla, we mean khalwa and uzla as understood by the first generation, as practiced by the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam. The Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam ya'tazil, the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam goes into a state of seclusion, as the great woman relates to the tradition here, saying that Aisha anha wardaha in Al Bukhari, she said, kana yakhlu fi ghar al-hira, that the Prophet ﷺ would go into a state of seclusion inside of ghar al-hira, sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam, and this is prior to the descent of Jibreel alayhi salam, the 38th year. Hubbiba ilayhi, she says, it was made beloved to him, sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam, and we love whatever he loves, isn't it? Remember that we love whatever he loves. And حقيقة حبب الله, it was Allah Ta'ala who made it beloved to the Rasul sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam. But the language of Aisha, ajib, a language, subhanallah, afsah sahaba, they say. Nobody more eloquent amongst the Sahaba than Sayyidina Aisha radiallahu anha wardaha. If you look at the traditional Bukhari, she said, حُبِّبَ إِلَيْهِ khalwa, the khalwa was made beloved to him. And this is what the sigha, the language expression here is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, unmentioned, unseen. That's the beginning of khalwa. Araftum, then by the end of that statement, hatta ja'ahu al-haq,
until the haq, the real God, Allah Ta'ala, came unto him. Now she reveals, because the process of khalwa and uzla, that is where you have divine disclosure. That is where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will reveal himself, unveil himself to you. So long as it's under the right conditions, under the right supervision. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for tawfiq and to render us from them. Jalla Jalaluhu ta'ala. And then look at all these lands that surround us. Sure, look at them. And they're calling out for us. Come quickly to me, yani. And they come and khalas, be in a state of seclusion with me. Hakada the land that surrounds you, subhanallah. You know, they say that what khalas from Ahlullah, the people of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, why do they call it there between Huna and Hunak, yani, between here and Bradford? Why are they calling that the Moors? Why is it called the Moors? That Muslims, Ahlullah, how could they used to be inside of these mountains? Radiallahu anhum, that's what's called the Moors, yani. The Moors, the Muslims of Andalus, radiallahu anhum wa ardahum. You know, in that age, you know, we think it's all new. In that age, they tell us statistically, in that age, there was more Muslims per capita in England in that age, the reign of Elizabeth I, than in the reign of Elizabeth II, where we're in now. More Muslims per capita then. And they defined that land as their land. Sure, not like London, yani, Gog and Magog, yani, not like Nejuj or Majuj, yani London, nah. They took to the mountains, to the hills, mashallah, tabarakallah. Hakada ahlullah, the people of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Hakada our tradition, from the Rasul sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam, to Abu Bakr as-Siddiq radiallahu ta'ala anhu warda, to all of those early companions. If we could remove ourselves from our time, from our situation, and go back to that early part, mashallah, tabarakallah, up until Dar al-Arqam, you would find all of those around the Prophet ﷺ worshiping Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the original creation. Hakada. Onto the term ma'rifah, Imam Abdullah al-Haddad rahimahullah ta'ala, he says the only way you achieve ma'rifah is by being in Allah ta'ala's creation and contemplating over his creation. The only way, al-Haddad rahimahullah ta'ala says. He doesn't say you're going to get ma'rifah through reading the Quran, or even reading a hadith of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, or through ruk'a sujood, praying. He says by being in creation and contemplating and meditating over creation. It has a bewildering effect upon the human heart and the human soul in attracting the slave unto Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, such that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala discloses himself to them. And we just bar ourselves, for real. We bar ourselves on the basis of it because we don't follow his footsteps carefully, sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam. In the issue we're speaking about here, ma fi kalam, there is no kalam. Now nobody could raise their mouth and say, I don't really reckon. Shh. Ma fi kalam in this. Araftum. And these are the things what we have to take seriously, Araftum. Otherwise, khalas, we're on boats and we've got no quwad, we've got no captains, we've got no leaders, we've got no people who know how to navigate the boat unto Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. How can you reach him? And you show people to reach him when you yourself have never reached him, subhanahu wa ta'ala. You've never reached him. Jalla Jalaluhu ta'ala. And so ma'rifah here, fi'l al-qalb. Ghazali Al Bukhari rahimahullah ta'ala wants, whether you want it as what the dictates of faith, or whether you want that faith in motion, i.e. experiencing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that's what the Sahaba want. Araftum? And in the way of the Sahaba radiallahu anhum wardahum, you're not going to see the Sahaba sitting down, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen, wa sallallahu ala Sayyidina Muhammadin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam. You're not going to see the Sahaba in durus like this, studying Imaan, or studying Aqidah, or studying fiqh. That's not how they take religion. Religion unfolds in a very organic way for the Sahaba. Can you imagine all the books that people have read as an example inside of theology, and they've not reached where the Sahaba reached? All of the fiqh that people have studied and memorized, and you ain't even reached where the Sahaba reached, and you yourself think that you can regurgitate more than them. That is not deen. We should not mistake that for deen. Deen is not what you know. That's not what deen is, That there, khalas, kuffar can conquer that. Kuffar can master that, That there is just a brain. Somebody can read a book, and then they can begin to regurgitate what they've read. Khalas, shay sahel, That's sahel, Deen is living, it's being. That is what deen is in and of itself. Okay, the way of the Sahaba. And that's the men and the women that were crafted by Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Wa ana a'lam billah, and I know God better. And I know what God wants better than anybody else. Sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam. And look at the type of people he crafted. Sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam. Now, a great teacher, Habib Umar, Hafidhullah, he said that the knowledge of the Sahaba, he called it original knowledge. That's what he called the real knowledge. The knowledge of the Sahaba, yeah, you could see it upon their form. If you want to know the ahkam of salah, watch them. Don't look at a book. You want to know how to pray, look at them pray. There are people who have read what they've read in Salah and they still don't even pray properly. Or they don't pray upon the degree of the Sahaba. You know, the great Imams there in Hadramaut, inside of, in the Zambal, buried in the Zambal, of the Adarisa radiallahu anhu warda, they used to see him, some of the Imams of them used to see him when he prayed. They used to be like crave. Like when they looked at him pray, that everything that they'd read in the books of law, he had inside of his prayer. And he wasn't of those who sat inside of the majalis, everything, he just had it, radiallahu anhu warda. And they were bewildered, the Imams of Tareem. And they used to go and ask him, class, you don't sit in the majalis here. How is it that you could pray like that? He said, I learned it from my dad. I just learned it from my dad, yani. Heck at the transmission, isn't it? He just followed closely his father, and his father, and his father, and his father, and his father. Heck at that. Religion is ultimately transmitted, yani. Heck at that. And they're reading books, radiallahu anhum wardahum. You know, the Imams, the students of Imam Ahmed ibn Hanbal, radiallahu anhum wardahum, how they used to be amazed inside the books with the great Imam, saying that Imam Ahmed ibn Hanbal, radiallahu anhu, memorized 1 million, in excess of 1 million ahadith. Imam Ahmed ibn Hanbal, radiallahu anhu wardah, memorized. And they used to say to Imam Ahmed ibn Hanbal, his students, they used to speak about this great Imam, his name is Ma'ruf al-Kharqi, radiallahu anhu wardah. They used to speak about Ma'ruf al-Kharqi and say, look, Ma'ruf al-Kharqi, ya Imam, that he doesn't sit in the majalis like us, he doesn't study knowledge in the way we study knowledge. How can they used to say, favoring these type of majalis, or often as if this is the be-all and end-all of deen. It's a mere means, it's just a mere means. And there's some who Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allows to traverse without such means. And so they used to sort of speak in quote-unquote against Ma'ruf al-Kharqi, that he doesn't sit in the majalis of ilm. And Imam Ahmed ibn Hanbal, radiallahu anhu wardah, he said, wayhak, he said, woe to you. Do we not do what we do save to be like Ma'ruf? We already doing this just to be like him, radiallahu anhu wardah. If he gets there through it or without it, radiallahu anhu wardah, what's called tahsil al-hasil, radiallahu ta'ala anhu wardah. Always remember this, Araftum, always remember it. And just like anything inside of the world, it can be a slippery slope. Means can be means to arrival, or there can be means to distance. Means. It just depends whether you're orientated properly, Okay? Majalis of ilm, they have one purpose, and that is for you to be, for you to live. Take it from the sudur and place it inside of the sudur. Take it from the lines of pages and place it inside of your heart and being. And so وَأَنَّ الْمَعْرِفَ فِعْلُ الْقَلْبِ. And so ma'rifah here is an act of the heart. And so faith is an act of the heart. The basis of it, Imam Al Bukhari, rahimahullah ta'ala, wants. And this is coming into knowledge of Allah ta'ala. The word irfan in the Arabic language, it differs from the word ilm. Irfan in the Arabic language, it's a human quality. And the word like ma'rifah, it's a human quality. You can't apply it to the divine. Imam Al-Ghazali rahimahullah ta'ala said not apply it to the divine, because the basis of it in language, it's knowledge after ignorance. And so that's a quality of human beings, not a quality of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But ilm is a quality of the divine, Jalla Jalaluhu ta'ala. And that is knowledge that is not preceded by ignorance in and of itself. لِقَوْلِهِ تَعَالَى وَلَكِنْ يُؤَخِذُكُمْ بِمَا كَسَبَتْ قُلُوبُكُمْ. Likewise, he says that knowledge and ma'rifah here, gnosis, is an action of the heart due to the statement of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, وَلَكِنْ يُؤَخِذُكُمْ بِمَا كَسَبَتْ قُلُوبُكُمْ, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will take you to account for what your hearts in, that your hearts have deeds in and of itself. And how can that we want to take radiallahu anhu wardah? Imam Al Bukhari wants to grant us from the tradition that he gives us. Sayyidina Muhammad ibn Salam قال أخبرنا عبد ibn Hisham عن أبيه يعني عروة بن زبير عنه وارضاه عن عائشة رضي الله تعالى عنها قالت. The hadith of Sayyidina Aisha رضي الله تعالى عنها وارضاها, and of the greatest of the wives of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, al-ikhtilaf, upon the difference of opinion that is held between Sayyidina Khadija al-Kubra, Khadija bint Khuwaylid radiallahu ta'ala anha, and Sayyidina Aisha bint Abi Bakr radiallahu anha, which is who is the greatest of the wives of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And a dominant opinion that is whom, that is Sayyidina Khadija radiallahu ta'ala anha wardaha, but there are aqwal qawiyya, that there are very strong opinions held by the ulama that say that it's Sayyidina Aisha radiallahu ta'ala anha wardaha, of towering figure, the most beloved of the wives of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, clearly after Sayyidina Khadija radiallahu ta'ala anha wardaha. When the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam was asked not about his wives, not about women, but about people period, when he was asking, man ahabba nas ilayk, who is the most beloved person to you? The Prophet ﷺ said, Aisha. It's Aisha. And then the person said, min al-rijal, from the rijal, from the men. And then the Prophet ﷺ said, Abuha. He defined Abu Bakr through Aisha. Abuha. He said, her father from the rijal. But his first statement was Aisha radiallahu anha wardaha. And obviously, then the people of Madinatul Munawwara are going to sense the profound love that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam has to say to Aisha radiallahu anha wardaha. And when everybody wants to seek from the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam the good countenance or benefaction of the Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam, often they do that by giving the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam gifts. And if you're going to give somebody a gift, you're trying to discern when they're in the best mood. Or often, when they're in the best mood, you give them a gift, khalas, jaza'an wifaqa, what they will give you will be mashallah. And so Ahlul Medina conspired to always give gifts to the Prophet ﷺ upon Aisha's day. On the day of Aisha. How could they get? Upon the day of Aisha. And then the wives of the Prophet ﷺ, caught on to it. And so they got a bit like, upset by that. Why does Medina always give gifts to the Prophet ﷺ on Aisha's day with the Prophet ﷺ? And so they go to one of the great wives of the Prophet ﷺ, the Aqila, the Nasiha, radiallahu ta'ala anha, or Salama, Hind bin Abi Umayyah al-Makhzumiyah. They go to Sayyidah Salama, radiallahu ta'ala anha, wardaha, and they make her go and speak to the Rasul. Speak to the Rasul on our behalf, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, and tell the commander of Medina not just to give gifts to you upon Aisha's day, but they should give gifts upon any day. They want. So Salama radiallahu anha wardaha, she plucks up the courage and she goes to the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, and then the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, the Prophet was not happy at that. La tu'dhini fil Aisha, and do not harm me over Aisha. Do not harm me over Aisha. Do not harm me over Aisha. And then the Prophet he reveals the secret here. He said, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala shuf. He said, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has only ever revealed Quran to me when I am in bed with Aisha. Not with any of you. Shuf, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, greatest gift of Allah ta'ala to the Rasul, the Quran, And Allah Ta'ala Himself gives the Prophet ﷺ upon the day of Aisha, the Quran, not upon the days of any other of his women folk. The Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam said. And this great woman, mashallah, tabarakallah, it's really, really important for each and every single one of us to know her, to know her. We talk about Hubb al-Ansar is from faith. Hubb al-Ansar is definitely from faith. And what about Hubb al-Aisha? Radiallahu ta'ala anha wardaha. When we base love upon what? Husn and ihsan, upon beauty and extension of beauty traits. What about the traits of Aisha? There is not a single trait that is mamduh, that is praiseworthy in religion, say that Sayyidina Aisha radiallahu anha wardaha is characterized by them. Even though there are certain traits that one would say that they're more masculine in nature, that ordinarily they're traits that you'll see with the rijal, Rijal meaning men, masculinity here. Aisha radiallahu anha wardaha sabaqathum. That she just went ahead of even the Rijal in that regard. Radiallahu anha, intellectually greater than the Rijal. That's why in a biography radiallahu anha wardaha, they say Aisha radiallahu anha, in the biography Aisha kanat rajulan. She was a man fi ra'iha, in the way she sort of understood, the way her mind worked, radiallahu ta'ala anha warda, the highest level, radiallahu anha wardaha. Look at the Imam we made mention of this in Abu Musa al-Ash'ari, radiallahu anha, Imam of Yemen, in Abdullah ibn Qais, من أفقه الصحابة رضي الله عنه, of the most profound in understanding of the law of the Sahaba. That's where you find aqwal from the tabi'een. Some say the greatest imam of knowledge of the Sahaba as it relates to the law, Sayyidina Abdullah ibn Qais, Abu Musa al-Ash'ari, and he himself said whenever there was something we never understood of the law, we would go to Aisha and we find that Aisha had knowledge of it, radiallahu ta'ala anha wardaha, and he's brilliant in the law, brilliant in her understanding of the Prophet ﷺ, brilliant in the Arabic language, brilliant in poetry, brilliant in the history of the Arabs, radiallahu anha wardaha, brilliant in the practice, the realization of religion in and of itself, radiallahu ta'ala anha wardaha, a commander of armies. I mean, what are you saying when you stand as a leader of an army, and on one side you got Sayyidina Zubayr ibn Awam, and the other side Sayyidina Talha ibn Ubaidillah. And what does that say about you? Whatever the conditions or the circumstances may have been, radiallahu anha wardaha, but she's leading Rijal to war. Sayyidina Aisha radiallahu anha wardaha, and the entire war will be defined over what she's upon. The battle of the Camel of Aisha radiallahu ta'ala anha wardaha. This woman, MashaAllah, Tabarakallah, MashaAllah, Tabarakallah. No, marries the Prophet ﷺ 6 years of age in Mecca, in the month of Shawwal, and after the what, in the 10th year after prophecy, after the death of Sayyidina Khadija radiallahu anha wardaha, ala al-Asah. Most dominant opinion, she married the Prophet inside the month of Shawwal, although there are opinions, it was in the Ramadan, the same month that Sayyidina Khadija radiallahu ta'ala anha wardaha died. And then the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, and she's 6 years of age. And she was initially, so we get context, she was initially engaged, we could say, quote unquote, to Sayyidina Jubair ibn Mut'im, radiallahu ta'ala, and Sayyidina Jubair ibn Mut'im was obviously going to become of the Imams of the Sahaba, the son of Mut'im ibn Adi, radiallahu ta'ala anhu, Sayyidina Jubair, radiallahu ta'ala anhu warda. Until what? This great woman, the wife of Sayyidina Uthman ibn Mad'un, we made mention of an opinion that he's the first man to die inside of Mecca al-Mukarramah, that his wife, her name is Khawla bint Hakim, that she comes to the Prophet after the death of Khadija, and she says that it's not right for you to be single. Just pause for a moment so some brothers can think about that statement. It's not right for you to be single, she says to the Prophet and so she says to the Rasul look, and shuf. This is a woman speaking to the Prophet She says, Ya Rasulullah, why don't you marry both a woman who's never been married and a woman who has been married? Her proposal is two. She was supposed to marry two women. And then the Prophet says, and as for the one, and the bigger, the one who's never been married, man. The Prophet's asking her whom? She says, Aisha bint Habb al-Khalq ilayk. That's what she says. Aisha, the daughter of the most beloved person to you, yani Abu Bakr, and then the Prophet sallallahu Thayyib, as the one who has been married before. Who's that? She says, Sauda bin Zam'a radiallahu anha wardaha. And that, mashallah, in the kaydahun azim, and a beautiful kayd women have sometimes, because Sauda there is Khawla's best friend. It's her best mate, radiallahu ta'ala anha wardaha. So she's putting a word in for their best friend, saying to the Sauda, radiallahu ta'ala anha wardaha, and it comes to pass. And saying it's saying the Khawla, and this is a good thing in terms of deen, especially in terms of quote unquote spiritual activism. People here in spiritual activism, in activism in deen, people have got a lot to say, people got a lot to say. And they'll sit there on their couches, roughed up, whatever they drink, whether it's Horlicks, whether it's coffee, or whether it's hot milk. You get the point, and they've got their biscuits, and you get the point. They may even have a remote control inside of their hand, and they've got everything to say about everything. But khalas qaleel, and what you actually see them do in terms of activism is if activism only applies to the tongue. So like how fast and how long the tongue can actually move. And so Sayyidina Khawla suggests to the Prophet something, and so go and do it. Now Prophet sends it back up on it. Go on, you go and arrange it. Now you're going to make the suggestion, then khalas. That there is deen, very, very important. Or often, if you want to suggest something, then khalas, be the change that you want to see. That's it. You be it, That's the being of the religion in and of itself. And so she does. She goes and arranges it with Sayyidina Zum'ah, saying it to Sauda bin Zum'ah, and then she goes and arranges it with Abu Bakr himself. And that was a bit more a complex issue. Because Abu Bakr was like, what about Jubair ibn Mut'im? She goes, "Khalas, you sort that out." Yeah. She goes, "You go sort that out." You know, and so Sayyidina Abu Bakr thinks, and then he goes to Sayyidina to Mut'im ibn Adi, not Sayyidina, but Mut'im ibn Adi. Well, Mut'im ibn Adi, the Prophet spoke good about him. At Badr, Mut'im ibn Adi died as a disbeliever. If Mut'im ibn Adi was alive today, I would give him all of the prisoners of Badr to do whatever he wants to them. That kind of the Prophet you have respect for Mut'im ibn Adi. And so Abu Bakr goes to Mut'im ibn Adi, and Mut'im ibn Adi, who's a disbeliever, yani, and Abu Bakr, mashallah, tabarak, lieutenant of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, they're like, well, what are you saying? Abu Bakr's like, well, no, tell me what you're saying. You know, I'll give you my word, but what are you saying? He's like, well, what are you saying, Abu Bakr? No, what are you saying? The point what they're saying is that Abu Bakr doesn't want to break it, but Mut'im ibn Adi, in his mind, he sees it as better that his son, because the disbelievers at this point in time, that his son, Jubair, doesn't marry Abu Bakr's daughter. You get the point? And so, Mut'im ibn Adi, khalas, okay, we cancelled the contract. And so the contract was cancelled for Sayyidina Aisha to actually marry Jubair ibn Mut'im, and then the Prophet ﷺ marries her inside of the month of Shawwal, mashallah, tabarakallah, the month of marriage. And then likewise, the Prophet consummates that marriage not in Mecca, but in Medinatul Munawwar, the Prophet ﷺ consummates the marriage. Although often, as you see inside of Sirah, that there's always going to be sort of sometimes the years. And they often don't match up. Okay, don't match up because they say the consummation is at 9 years of age. Yet the most that they agree that the Prophet ﷺ consummate the marriage in Shawwal after Badr. Okay, in the second year, Shawwal straight after the Battle of Badr. And that gives us approximately 4 or 5 years. I'm trying to do my maths now. It does look like approximately 5 years, isn't it? From marriage. Everyone got the point there? 5 years, do the maths, 4 or 5 years. Which would put Aisha at 10, 11. Although what the books say, 6. Araftum? Ala kulli hal, mashallah tabarak. But we do have a statement of Aisha, radiallahu anha wardaha herself, where she makes the statement that she married the Prophet at 6, she was consummated at 9, and he died when I was 18 years of age. Hakad, we have that statement from Sayyidina Aisha, radiallahu ta'ala anha wardaha herself. And so, mashallah, Sayyidina Aisha, that is a very, very great woman, inshallah tabarakallah. And what we hope, inshallah ta'ala, we become people who really study her understandings of religion, study the great students, many of them like here, Sayyidina Urwa ibn Zubair, radiallahu anhu, the son of Sayyidina Zubair ibn Awam, and the brother of the one that she, quote unquote, according to the opinion of most, that the Prophet that the Prophet ﷺ gave her a kunya after, because the kunya is Abu Abdullah. The weak opinion, Abdullah here, was the name of a miscarriage that she had. Okay, there's a weak opinion that Sayyidina Aisha had a miscarriage to the Prophet ﷺ. Although the vastly dominant opinion is that Abdullah here is Abdullah ibn Zubair, the great Imam of the Sahaba, first person to be born inside of Medinatul Munawwara. Sayyidina Abdullah ibn Zubair ibn Awam radiallahu ta'ala anhu warda. Because that's the nephew of Sayyidina Aisha, obviously his mother being Sayyidina Asma, the half elder sister of Sayyidina Aisha, radiallahu ta'ala anha wardaha. So she relates this tradition, radiallahu ta'ala anha wardaha. كان رسول الله صلى الله عليه وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم إذا أمرهم بالأعمال بما يطيقون. And that's very, very important, that the Prophet ﷺ, whenever he commands the companions with anything, he commands the companions with only that which is within their capacity. Only. The Prophet never burdens a companion with anything. And capacities, just like faith, increase and decrease. They're not static, yani. And so the Prophet is always eagerly watching the reality of his companions to see what is it that they can bear. And this is very, very important in terms of the deen, yani, in terms of the deen. That the deen, mashallah ta'ala, the journey to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, yani, is a long journey. It's a long journey, yani, to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And the intelligent slave here, what they take from the way of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, in each heen, in each moment that they're in, they only embrace that which they can bear in the long haul. In the long haul, you have to pace it. Like you're in a race. If you're in a long race, yani, if you like the hair in it, you like the hair, and you're gonna run out of gas, as Habib there, gassed out there. He was rolling with Al-Azim there, rolling on the masjid floor, yani, after him in his jiu-jitsu. Then he gassed out. Why never paced it, yani? You got to pace it for the long haul. You got to pace it for the long haul. That's like we mentioned today, say the Salam ibn Aqwa, he said once when he's coming with the Prophet started emerging inside the Medina to Munawwara, saying the Salama, there was a man from the Sahaba, Lam yusbaq, yani. Nobody could beat him in the race. Nobody, never defeated in the race. From the sunnah of the Prophet is sprints, and he's sprinting. And the Prophet would sprint in a race with Sayyidina Aisha. After war, they're coming back from war with the armies, and the Prophet would tell the army, go ahead, go ahead. And so the entire army of the Sahaba would go ahead, and they would leave the Prophet and Sayyidina Aisha in the midst of the desert by themselves. Yani. And then the Prophet would say, on your marks, well, he wouldn't say that, I'm just sort of, you get the point, just as we say, on your marks, get set, go, yani. And so he did, he used to say to Aisha, can you imagine what a sight that would be, eh? What a sight, yeah. And we only know that from Aisha, what a sight that would be, seeing the Prophet and Aisha. And this is tarbiyah, or often tarbiyah now. Because Aisha says, sabaqtuhu, and I beat him. No, you didn't. He let you win. And that is tarbiyah for your wife. Kashif. Yeah, that is tarbiyah for your wife. Yani. Tarbiyah. Or often they say, a man, how can they say, in the method in Arabic language, they say, in a man in his house, yughla. He's always vanquished inside of his house. She is queen of the house, yani. Or often, and you're always subservient to your wife. Or often, how can they say? But outside of the house, la. I take refuge in you from what being what? Be subdued, my man. The dua of the Prophet he said, Yaghlib wa yughlab. Hakada rijal. That's balance. Balance. Make sure we understand that. Or often, guaranteed, no problems inside of your marriage because you fronting with your wife. You haven't took from the Rasul sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Like you there, Mr. Ja'ir. That's what we'll call you, Mr. Ja'ir, yani. Mr. Tyrant inside of the house, isn't it? You think manhood is sort of flexing, quote unquote, your delusionary authority over your wife. Go flex it outside the house. Go flex it, go on. And then when you go to work, oh yes, Mr. Jones. When you get into work and then inside of the house, oh, that's Allah, salam, Allah, that's Allah Ta'ala for safety and security. So the Prophet lets Aisha win. MashaAllah, tabarakallah. And then saying Aisha radiallahu anha wardaha. No, it's beautiful what she says. So she says, cement, she got bigger. She said, when we got bigger, we raced again. And the Prophet won. Well, you see the excuse there? See how she says, when I got bigger, radiallahu ta'ala anha wardaha, as if you're going to beat the Prophet in a race. So my man here, when they get to the outskirts of Medina, radiallahu anhu wardaha, he said, I want to race. Everyone off horseback, I want to race back to Medina to Munawwara. And the only person I'm going to race is Rasulullah. Look at him. Sahabi here, he was a challenge to the Prophet to a race to Medina to Munawwara. Saying the Salam ibn Aqwa, he says, Ya Rasulullah, khalas, let me do it on your behalf here. Let me race on your behalf. So the Prophet said, Ya Salama. So go Salama, go and race him. And so the man and say the Salama race, man's fast. This is the point one. They set off. And so Sayyidina Salama radiallahu anhu warda, he says, what I do, I just keep the man in distance. I can tell you what he did. Remember, Salama can outrun a horse, yani. Remember, we told you, he can outrun a horse, Salama ibn Aqwa. He said, just keep him in distance, yani. Shh. And then when Medina comes in distance, then, khalas, I come right up on his shoulders. You get the point? How he paces it. Then the closer we get, and Salama just takes off, radiallahu anhu warda. He paced it for the distance. And that's deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Salama always had the what, as you say, keep your eye on the prize. Radiallahu ta'ala anhu warda. How can we have to be? Always keep our eye upon the prize. Like we don't know how long we've got, yani. That's one of the wisdoms why Allah Ta'ala hid the moment of death from us. If this was all about 1 week, then it's one thing, innit? But maybe it's a week, maybe it's a year, maybe it's a decade, maybe it's 30, 40, 50. And the deen of Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala, we've got to pace each and every single act for that distance. We heard about Sayyidina Abdullah ibn Amr, radiallahu ta'ala anhu warda, that about the issue of fasting. Som Dawood from his youth, radiallahu anhu warda. But when I became old, it became difficult. But he couldn't leave it. Because the manhaj of the Sahaba is that they marry deeds. Why do they marry deeds? And as you say, till death do us part. Why do they marry deeds? Because it's beloved to the Prophet ﷺ. Who says so? Great woman here, Aisha radiallahu anha warda, inside of Bukhari, أحب الأعمال إلى رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم ما هو ديما. That the most beloved of all acts of the Prophet صلى الله عليه وسلم are those that are dima, the long haul, consistent. يعني the Prophet صلى الله عليه وسلم أحب الأعمال إلى الله أدومها. That the most beloved of all deeds to Allah Ta'ala, أدومها, dima. Those that are most consistent. And so to be consistent in deeds, it depends upon capacity. It always depends upon capacity, mashallah, tabarakallah. And capacity grows, isn't it? And if you do something consistently, your capacity begins to grow, begins to expand in and of itself. The same way, by doing something consistently physically, we get stronger. But by doing something spiritually, we also get stronger. Our capacity grows. And the Prophet ﷺ deen is about always taking that into consideration. And that's why Aisha anha is telling us here, إِذَا أَمَرَ أَمَرَهُمْ, that whenever he commanded them with actions that they could what do, that they were able to do within their capacity. قَالُوا إِنَّا لَسْنَا كَهِئَتِكَ يَا رَسُولَ اللَّهِ. And verily we are not like you, O Messenger of God. We're not like you. And there's going to be two types of Sahaba in relation to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And both in this regard are wrong. They're both wrong. Okay, and we've got to find where we are. There are those when they see the Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam, they say, like here, يعني لست كهيئتك يا رسول الله. We're not like you, O Messenger of God. And so if we're not like the Messenger of God, well, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala غفر الله ما تقدم من ذنبك وما تأخر, and Allah Ta'ala has forgiven all of your sins post and prior, جل في العلا, thereby we've got to do more than him. You get the point? So in the reckoning of Sayyidina Sahaba, because we're not like the Prophet ﷺ in his relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we've got to do more than the Rasul sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam, go to extremes. You'll find names mentioned in that regard. Names like Sayyidina Ali ibn Abi Talib, of that. Names like Sayyidina Abu Darda, of that. Names like Sayyidina Abdullah ibn Amr, of that. There is certain Sahaba radiallahu anhum wa dam, hakada they thought. Radiallahu anhu wa dam. Of them, I'm going to fast, never going to break my fast. Hakada they said, I was Abdullah ibn Amr, who had that opinion, radiallahu anhu wa dam. And of them, I'm going to pray. I'm never, ever, ever going to not pray. All he's going to do is pray. Abu Darda, Sayyidina Ibrahim ibn Amr, radiallahu anhu wa dam. Of them, I ain't going to engage women ever. Ali ibn Abi Talib, karamallahu wajhu, radiallahu anhu warda. News comes to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Ghadib, Prophet says, not happy with that, not happy with that. Sallallahu alaihi wa alihi wa sahbihi wasallam. Verily, I'm the most knowledgeable and the most God-fearing of every single one of you. And the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, I pray and I don't pray. I fast and I don't fast. And I marry women, engage women, he said, sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sahbihi wasallam. And Bukhari is one of the Sahaba. His name was Abu Israel. Abu Israel. His understanding of the extremity he wanted to go to compensate for not being like the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, that he made an oath. He went into the desert, made an oath right there in the desert that he's going to stand and never sit down. I don't know where he got that from. He's just going to stand there forever. Yeah, the way you understood. The Prophet said, tell him to break his oath and sit down. Yani. Just sit down. The Prophet said, that's one type of Sahaba. But look at the himma that they had. Yani. Himma. Sayyidina Ali ibn Abi Talib, himma. Yani. Sayyidina Abu Darda ibn Amr, himma. That's why you see the Prophet, you look at Sayyidina Salman al-Farisi, radiallahu anhu, the Prophet says and pairs Sayyidina Salman with Sayyidina Abu Darda. And so Sayyidina Salman, mashallah, tabarakallah, mu'tadil, Sayyidina balanced, very balanced Sayyidina Salman. And so Sayyidina Salman, radiallahu anhu, he said one day he's walking through Medina and he sees Darda, he sees the wife of Abu Darda, radiallahu anhu. And when he sees, Allah alam, what it meant, but she was like, I mean, it's like spiritually, emotionally, she was just messed up, messed up. And so saying that Salman sees that she's just not right. And Salman says, Mabiki, what's up, what's wrong? And she says, your brother, your brother, meaning Abu Darda, your brother. And so Salman gets it. Abu Darda known, radiallahu anhu warda. Abu Darda, radiallahu anhu warda, he said, radiallahu anhu warda, I tried to balance between tijara wal ibadah. I tried to balance between trade and worship, and dunya and deen. I tried to have a balance, and I couldn't maintain a balance. So I cast away tijara, and I just focused upon ibadah. And so Sayyidina Salman says, Ya Abu Darda, Yani, I want to sort of stay with you for a bit, yani. I'm staying with you. Marhaba, marhaba. And so Sayyidina Salman, he says now when they get into the house after Isha, Salman goes to lie down, Abu Darda getting ready for Salah. He says, what are you doing? He says, I'm going to pray. It's not time for Salah. Sleep? No, go to sleep, yani. Salman elder, yani, khalas. Lies down, saying Abu Darda. He said, 1/3 of the night passed, Abu Darda gets up. Salman, like, what are you doing? He says, Salah, Musalli. No, you ain't praying. No, get down, back to sleep. Get back to sleep, go down. And so he lies down, Abu Darda, and he comes to the last third of the night, the Sahar, Al-an ya Abu Darda. Now, arise. Khalas, qum, tusalli, get up and pray. And then he mentions his great statement, Inna li jasidika alayka haqqa. That verily your body has a right over you. Your family have a right over you. Your Lord has a right over you. Give everything its right, he's saying. Give everything its right, yani. That's balance. That's what the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa came with. He came with the balanced way, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, in the way of leniency. As in Bukhari, bu'ithtu bidina samha. I've been sent with the deen of samha. And the meaning of samha, which is overlooking, the overlooking way, but they call it the lenient way. The way that always overlooks, allows people to work with inside of their capacity. And Sayyidina Abu Darda, he goes and checks it with the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, and the Salman qala hakada. The Salman said this. The Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam says, Sadaqa Salman. Sadaq. He spoke the truth, Salman radiallahu anhu wa ardahu. Hakada, some go to extreme. That's one type of a Sahaba, but the Prophet sallallahu alayhi, because you always have what you call ifrat and tafrit. Some people go to excess, some people are prone to laxity. Heck, human beings, excess and laxity. And when we speak about character is always balance. It's the furthest point from excess and the furthest point from laxity. But that is relative to your capacity. Relative to your capacity. Then you have other Sahaba, which is the context here. Other Sahaba, they see the Rasul, and they class the Rasul, the Rasul, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, what they're saying, we cannot be like him. And how many times, whether it be lisan al-hal or lisan al-maqal, how many times do we say that? Oh, Rasulullah, no, we can't be like the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Yeah, sadaq, yani. You can't be like the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. But like saying Ali bin Abi Talib, karamallahu wajhu, said, about those funny people, yani, he said, radiallahu anhu warda, kalimatul haqq. Yuriduna bihal batil. It's a true word, but they desire falsehood through it. Yeah, you can't be like the Rasul sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. But what do you mean by that? Note that the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam never shows you him. Aisha, hadith of Aisha. You know, the reality of the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam beyond a'yun an-nas. It's beyond the eyes of people. And then when whoever you may be are giants, when they ever get there into the personal space of the Prophet ﷺ to see how he is in private, like saying Abdullah ibn Mas'ud, like saying Hudayfa there, when they sneak into into the Prophet ﷺ's tahajjud, like saying Abdullah ibn Mas'ud said, it was a day I was with the Prophet ﷺ, and I had a really bad opinion there of the Prophet ﷺ, or bad thought came to my mind. He said, what was that? Tabi'in asked, what was that? He said, once I was with the Prophet ﷺ in tahajjud, and Sayyidina Abdullah ibn Mas'ud, Imam inside the house, he said that we used to think Abdullah ibn Mas'ud and his mother were actually from Ahlul Bayt, from the family of the Prophet ﷺ, because they had access inside and outside the house of the Prophet, coming to and from the house of the Prophet, which is rare. And so he gets there with the Prophet ﷺ, Abdullah ibn Mas'ud, and Muslims in tahajjud, Allahu Akbar. And so the Prophet said, can you imagine and think about it ourselves? Like you want to be with the Rasul sallallahu, think about it. And so now the Prophet sallallahu, besides Fatiha, فَشَرَعَ فِي الْبَقَرَةِ Alif, Lam, Mim. And he says here, the Prophet sallallahu, he said, in my mind, I'm saying, the Prophet is going to recite verses, 10 odd verses, then he's going to make a ruku', yani. Prophet goes past 10, goes past 20, goes past 100, goes past 200, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, and he finishes Baqarah. And then Abdullah Masud said, say yani, he's going to make a ruku'. He's going to make a ruku' now after finishing Baqarah. The Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, after Baqarah, Alif Lam Mim, Allahu la ilaha illahu. Prophet now into Ali Ibrahim, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. A few verses, ثم يركع. Then he's going to make a ruku'. Nah, the Prophet goes to the very, very end. يصبروا وصابروا ورابطوا واتقوا الله. The Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam say yarka. La yarka, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Keeps going, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Abdullah Mas'ud said, I gets to the point right there when he's inside the Nisa. I had a bad opinion, bad thought there. So what was that thought? So I was going to give salams and just leave the Rasul. I wasn't going to say Assalamu alaikum, rahmatullahi alaikum, leave the Rasul, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Difficult. What he shows the Sahaba is that, as Aisha is saying, ma yutiquna. He is only presenting to you that which is within your capacity. And note, that's the deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Ultimately, you have to have not a high opinion of yourself. You have to have a high and a good opinion of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. What Allah ta'ala ever exposes you into the religion is within your capacity at some point in the duration of your lifetime. That's what he's exposing to you, Jalla Jalalu ta'ala. There's nothing of the deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that you are not or that you are incapable of. Nothing whatsoever. Hakada, you have to understand that, inshallah, tabarakallah. Because many of us, Araftum, Zayn al-Abidin prayed 1,000 rak'ah inside of the duha. Radiyallahu anhu. Radiyallahu anhu. I say the Zayn al-Abidin Ali bin Hussein anhu. The fact that you've been exposed to what Zayn al-Abidin anhu did, you've already been exposed to it, so you can be of it, yani. At some point in the duration of your lifetime. But, like Salim ibn Aqwa, you gotta pace it. Radiyallahu ta'ala anhu warda. Yani Allah ta'ala alim, but our presupposition, the likes of Sayyidina Zayn al-Abidin, didn't begin with 1,000 rak'ah inside of the duha. Araftum, 2 rak'ah, innit? Then graduates to 4. Then he's on 8. Then he's on 10. Maybe 100 next day. 400, 500. You're off them. Hakada. His capacity expands. And so the Rasul sallallahu alayhi wa sallam here, the Sahaba radiallahu لَسْنَا كَهِيَأَتِكُمْ يَا رَسُولَ اللَّهِ إِنَّ اللَّهَ قَدْ غَفَرَ لَكَ مَا تَقَدَّمَ مِنْ ذَنبِكَ وَمَا تَأَخَّرَ فَيَغْضَبُ حَتَّى يُعْرَفُ الْغَضَبُ فِي وَجْهِهِ. And so the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam, he became angry until you could discern the anger in the face of the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. And remember, the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, we've established once again in Al Bukhari about the great woman herself, Aisha, he never gets angry for himself. His anger, the Prophet ﷺ, often they say, Shashat al-Haq. He is the screen of God. You want to know how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is in any instant? Look at the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. In Dahik, if the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa you see the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa smiling, happy in a state of bust, that you know Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala yadhak, subhanahu wa ta'ala al-basit. If you see that the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa yaghdab, that you know Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Yaghdab Jalla Jalalu ta'ala mato. It manifests through the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam. And so the Sahaba here have transgressed. Here. Inni atqakum wa alamakum billahi ana. Verily the most conscious of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the most knowledgeable of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is I. Inside of Bukhari, rahimahullah ta'ala, is a tradition which sort of is alongside this tradition, which clarifies this tradition further. And this is when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reveals to the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, and it's in Medina, the beginning of Medina, the end of Surah Al-Baqarah, that لِلَّهِ مَا فِي السَّمَاوَاتِ وَمَا فِي الْأَرْضِ وَإِن تُبْدُوا مَا فِي أَنفُسِكُمْ أَوْ تُخْفُوهُ يُحَاسِبْكُم بِاللَّهِ لِلَّهِ مَا فِي السَّمَاوَاتِ وَمَا فِي الْأَرْضِ. To Allah belongs whatever's in the heavens and whatever's in the air. وَإِن تُبْدُوا مَا فِي أَنفُسِكُمْ أَوْ تُخْفُوهَا. If you manifest what's inside of your soul, or you hide it, يُحَاسِبْكُم بِهِ اللَّهِ. Allah will take you to account for it. So here, it's not just Allah Ta'ala taking you to account for deeds, or that which you do. Or, like the Sahaba come into knowledge, that Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala take you to account for what you say. There's a point where the Sahaba thought deeds is one thing, but speech is another thing. They actually thought that. Sayyidina Mu'adh ibn Jabal, he said, when we realized that speech was from deeds, we took our speech very, very seriously. Sayyidina Mu'adh says, but Allah Ta'ala, not just your deeds, not just your speech, but here, your heart, and your thoughts. Allah Ta'ala is taking you to account for thoughts. And so the Sahaba, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala take us to account for our thoughts. Sayyidina Ali bin Abi Talib said we used to have thoughts that if they were to manifest, we'd be declared disbelievers. Sayyidina Ali, karamallahu wajh, used to say that. The type of thoughts are, that fleet through the human mind. Say that Imam Al-Nawawi rahimahullah ta'ala, his understanding of this is that this is about istiqrar fil qalb. Yani what Allah ta'ala has taken them to account for is what roots itself, what settles inside the heart, not what fleets through the heart. And Imam Al-Nawawi's opinion rahimahullah ta'ala, that is still valid to this day. To this day, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala takes the slave to account, Nawawi's opinion, for whatever settles inside of the human heart, but not that which fleets, the fleeting thoughts that you have. And that is why when you have those type of fleeting thoughts, never engage them. Never engage those thoughts. Belittle them, yani. Deem them to be insignificant, so that they just pass, that they just go out, yani, and that they don't take root inside of your heart. And so Allah Ta'ala reveals the verse. And so the Sahaba, when they hear that verse, Kaif, yani. Sayyidina Abdullah bin Abbas, after the tradition of Sayyidina Abu Hurairah, in the tradition of Abdullah bin Abbas in Sahih Muslim, Abdullah bin Abbas, he said that they said that some of it, what Allah Ta'ala was saying, entered into our hearts, and some of it didn't, yani. And after, like us, they tell you the reality. And sometimes we read things, mashallah, yeah, and then khalas, you got all the himma for it. I mean, it's entered into your heart. And sometimes you read someone, you conveniently never read it. You act as if you've never read it, yani. Never entered inside of your heart. Abdullah bin Abbas said that he said some of it entered into our heart and others didn't. But the Sahaba are concerned, yani, of the things that makes them different from us. They are very concerned about their fate with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so it says that immediately they took to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. They took to the Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam immediately, and they go to the Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and the tradition, they kneel down in front of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And they said, Ya Rasulullah, there are things that are within our capacity, O Messenger of God. And they say the likes of prayer, the likes of jihad, the likes of fasting, the likes of charity, all of that within our capacity. But now our thoughts are going to be taken to account. They're saying to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, فَغَضِبْ. The Prophet got angry, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam says, do not say that which the people of the book said prior to you. سَمِعْنَا وَعَصَيْنَا. Like we hear and we disobey. Don't say that, yani. Meaning you're hearing what Allah Ta'ala is saying, but you're disobeying Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. وَلَكِنْ قُولُوا. However, say, سَمِعْنَا وَأَطَعْنَا غُفْرَانَكَ رَبَّنَا وَإِلَيْكَ الْمَصِيرُ. Hakada the Prophet says, before the verse is revealed, say that, سَمِعْنَا وَأَطَعْنَا غُفْرَانَكَ رَبَّنَا. What does that mean? سَمِعْنَا, we hear, طَعْنَا, we obey, غُفْرَانَكَ, but we seek your forgiveness. You get the point? Because we're going to fall short. And the nature of the human being is that we will fall short, yani. Hakada we are. Anybody like who doesn't believe, yani, that they fall short, they have fell short, yani. They've really, really fell short in that regard. That's our nature, we fall short. And so we compensate for the deficiency that is inherent inside of us by ghufranaka, ghufranaka, ghufranaka. Yani deficiency, Allah Ta'ala creates hardwires man in deficiency. So in deficiency, they turn towards the one who is free of all deficiency, subhanahu wa ta'ala. So we turn towards him. So say, غُفْرَانَكَ رَبَّنَا وَإِلَيْكَ الْمَصِيرُ. Yani, we seek your forgiveness, our Lord, وَإِلَيْكَ الْمَصِيرُ. فَقَالُوا. And so thereby they said it. هكذا رضي الله عنهم وارضاهم. Everyone see that, yani? They said it. They heard and they obeyed, and they said it, radiallahu ta'ala anhum warḍahum. And that's after that Allah Ta'ala thereby revealed the end of Baqarah, first and foremost, آمَنَ الرَّسُولُ بِمَا أُنزِلَ إِلَيْهِ مِنْ رَبِّهِ وَالْمُؤْمِنُونَ. Then that is revealed upon the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And then they said, فَعَلْنَا. After they said, فَعَلْنَا. We did it. We do whatever Allah Ta'ala is revealing, we're embracing. Then Allah, لَا يُكَلِّفُ اللَّهُ نَفْسًا إِلَّا وُسْعَهَا. The great verse now is revealed after that, which is Allah never burdens a soul beyond its capacity. Jalla Jalaluhu wa ta'ala. But understanding here that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, what he manifests to his people and to us by extension is whatever is within our capacity. What is beyond our capacity, he keeps hidden. Sallallahu alaihi wasallam, bainahu wa baina Rabb. That is between him and between his Lord, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for tawfiq. What we also ask Allah Ta'ala for tawfiq for is that we don't become the means by virtue of which the Rasul Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam gets angry. Sallallahu Alaihi wa alihi Wasallam. We don't want to be making the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam angry. Sallallahu Alaihi wa alihi Wasallam. But if we do so slip, so we make him angry, that we know the way to sort of repair that is through what? Tawbah. As Aisha tells us, through Tawbah, returning back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for tawfiq in that regard. Tayyib, anyone have any questions? Do you have any questions?
Chief, in this day and age, what's practically the best way of doing the uzla?
The uzla. Real uzla, that sort of goes back to Hamza's question there yesterday. That's where you need teachers. Real uzla. You need shuyukh. Yeah. You need shuyukh for true, what's called sort of radical isolation. That's where the shuyukh come into it. Yeah. No, it's not advisable for somebody to do it by themselves. Yeah. And for the very reason, because Allah Ta'ala discloses himself. And the disclosure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for somebody who's not ready will khalas be counterproductive for them. If Allah Ta'ala discloses himself to you subhanahu wa ta'ala and you not be prepared for that, it will break you. Jalla Jalaluhu ta'ala, it will break you on that. And so that's why the shuyukh come into it. But part of the conversation we were having, inshallah ta'ala, today is not about radical isolation. It's just about living in healthy environments. That's what we're trying to say. Environments that are far more healthier for what religion, and for true religion, than what we live in. And we actually live in environments that are counterproductive religiously. Counterproductive. Okay? At best, they slow us down. At best. Any questions, inshallah ta'ala?
How would you translate the word himma? Is it capacity or
Himma is aspiration.
In Urdu,
Himmat. What does it mean in Urdu? So that's
it's the same thing.
strength.
It's the same thing.
Okay, so that's saying to aspire towards something, strength of aspiration. Yeah. Anyone else?
question on isolating ourselves as a community and buying land and being self-sufficient and animal farming and well. To what extent is the reality of that being in the UK, or would we not limit it to the UK? Would we say that we go back to Muslim lands and stuff? For example, in Pakistan we have people have farmland, the agriculture, they grow the crops, probably got some animals, they've got wells. Is that a real perspective for us in terms of going back?
Yeah, it's whatever suits a person best. Yeah. But the point what we're speaking about here, as the Prophet ﷺ told me, it's taqwa is wherever you may be, and the dictates of religion for wherever you may be, and the environments of religion are for wherever you may be. And so if somebody's pitching their tent inside of quote unquote the UK, then likewise, they've got to create conducive environments for faith, conducive environments that protect and nurture, allow their faith to grow. Or if they go to the Muslim world, likewise also. Okay? So it's regardless. So in terms of our conversation here, which obviously is about the UK, we're speaking about the UK. Like there needs to be a radical reapproach to where Muslims as communities live. Really, really important. And faith will not survive. It will not survive. We can see the rapid rate in which it's declining now. It will not survive. On a thread, it will be in our children's generation, like the Damocles sword. Then it'll be severed in our grandchildren's. And if it continues the way it's going now, not often, and people have to be see the signs of what is occurring here, inshallah ta'ala.
People talking about balance in life. So Allah has a right over us, Swami has rights over us. So how do we balance that? How much time can we give to family, to the wife, to be, what's the best way of doing that?
The objective is balance. Balance is always found in the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. It's always found in the Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam. In the hadith of Sayyidina Abu Hurairah, how the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam divided his time into three sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Not often, so a time that he gives to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, time that he gives to his family, and then time that he gives to himself. And then from the time that he gives to himself, then the Prophet ﷺ divides that amongst his companions, radiallahu ta'ala anhum wa ardahum, okay? And so that's balance, yani, that's balance. You find that in the Prophet ﷺ, okay?
Third family.
Yeah, that's also, it's found in the Prophet ﷺ. Yeah.
Is that over 24 hours?
Yeah, whatever. Yeah, over week hours. Wow.
Shay, do you know the distance that the Prophet ﷺ was saying that Aisha sprinted over?
No, maybe it's mentioned, there's never heard of the distance.
Shaykh, earlier you said that what were the traits of people that herd sheep?
As-sakina wal-waqar. As-sakina here is what it means, like tranquility, it relates to the heart. So it's tranquility of the heart. We call it tranquility or serenity. Waqar is what is composure. So waqar is outwardly, it's what you find upon the limbs. Waqar.
And what was the traits of herding camels and cows?
Yeah, it's like vainglory, it's like kibr and fakhar, the Prophet says. It's arrogance and pride, or pride and glory, whichever it is.
For both, that's the walk.
Both, they're two attributes. Not cows, camels. You say
What's
cows?
for camels?
Camels, for camels.
And cows.
Allah and the Prophet ﷺ. In that tradition, it doesn't mention cows. And, okay, although the Prophet ﷺ mentions cows, yani in a bad way, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, but not telling us about the actual attributes that it creates. And it's hadith of the Prophet ﷺ speaking about people like the face of cows. And the Prophet, and they say by the face of cows, we have the face of cows, is there's no uniqueness in man. The uniqueness of the human being is lost. Like if you the face of cows, all cows literally do look the same. You don't have a uniqueness of face. And so the Prophet used the word like the face of cows, in that human beings lose their own uniqueness. Because Allah Ta'ala creates every single person unique. Or the Prophet ﷺ speaks about, at the end of time, why our religion has been taken from us. وَاتَّبَعْتُمْ أَذْنَابَ الْبَقَرِ, or we follow the tails of cows. Although many of them, of the Imams, say that's about Americano, yani. That's about following the Americano. And that's the age of the cowboy, yani. We will follow the cowboy. Yani.
Hadith number 12, it mentions fitna. What is the meaning of, because in Arabic it's obviously a very vast word. What is the meaning of fitna in the hadith? Is it civil strife, or is it speaking about some type of tribulation?
Yani fitna here, and the word in the Arabic language, fitna, and it comes from, it's the process of gold. Gold is when you take gold and you put it into fire. Because what you're trying to do, you're trying to purify the gold. So what emerges in the Arabic language is what is called Ibriz, which is pure, unadulterated gold. And so that term fitna in the Arabic language is the process that gold undergoes in order to emerge pure. And that there, obviously, it's employed in the Kitaab as well as in the Sunnah and upon the tongues of the Imams, but as it relates to the human being. Because of the human being, the point here, the metaphor struck here, why it's being employed, is that we have to be exposed to, now you get the word, tribulation. When we are exposed to tribulation, tribulation allows our true metal to emerge. That's why the Prophet ﷺ in Bukhari, he said, "An-nasu kal-ma'adin ka-dhahabi wal-fidda." That human beings are like mines, like gold and silver. And so the process of purification for metals is the same, whether it's human metal or otherwise, okay? And so it's through tribulations that the reality of the human being emerges. And that's why it's Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, yablukum, bisharri wal khair. It's Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala who tests us with good and evil for a reason. So our true metal emerges, or like لَنَبْلُوَنَّكُمْ بشيء من الخوف والجوع ونقص من الأموال والأنفس وثمرات فبشر الصابرين. How Allah Ta'ala unleashes upon us all different types of tribulations, once again, in order for our true metal to emerge. خلق الموت والحياة ليبلوكم أيكم أحسن عملا. That He created death and life in order to see which one of us are the best indeed. The true metal emerges in and of itself. So the fitna here is what is tribulations that we have inside of life. But tribulations inside of life, what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants from that, and the Rasul wants from that, is that which compromises religion. Okay, that's with the tribulation over your religion. That which now
creates barriers between you and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala himself. It's just that your religion is in danger of decline or in danger of eradication in and of itself, okay? And when that becomes the case, remember Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent his Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam to clarify. And that there, in general, that's the great reality of hijrah, the great reality of uzla. That's what it's there for. You know, when Sahaba radiallahu anhu was struggling with the difficulties and the tribulations of Mecca, and khalas, don't worry, you know, you can obviously quote the hadith of the Prophet sallallahu like in the Bukhari, إِذَا حَبَّ اللَّهُ عَبْدًا إِبْتَلَاهُ. When Allah Ta'ala loves a slave, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will test that slave, will subject that slave to trials and tribulations. But for some of us, in the midst of tribulation, the hadith don't work. You're trying to remind him, it's a message of love from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Man, like, you're often, he can't understand that, or often because it's all about the issue of capacity. He's not ready to hear that. That's why he said Ali ibn Abi Talib would say, speak to people in a way that they understand. I could have said Ali would say, we speak to people in a way that we understand. What? You want people to disbelieve in the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam? I can even say. Because people can do that. You can sort of tell people something, not understanding them. They're like, what, man? Like, what? You tell me if Allah Ta'ala loves me here, I'd hate to see when he hates me, people that just not gonna get it, But fitna here, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Sahaba, the point is Sahaba themselves in Mecca, khalas. The Prophet says not telling them here, necessarily some of them, that this is the message of love from Allah Ta'ala. The Prophet will put them on a boat off top of Syria, You go there, you'll find the righteous king, and your deen will be secured. And look, when they go there, as Hamad there, the Najashi, secure the religion of the Sahaba, the flight from Mecca to Medina to Munawwara, likewise. Land prepared, Ansar ready to embrace. They've all took the oath of allegiance to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. سمعا وطاعة في المنشأ والمكره على يسر والعسر. They took the actual allegiance with the Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and so now people can go and they find an environment that is more conducive for religion to be practiced in. That's what fitna is. Fitna is your deen. Your deen is in danger. And if your deen is in danger, nothing more precious than it. You gotta keep on moving, and you gotta keep on moving. And to be in the world as a stranger or as a wayfarer, just keep moving. I don't know what it is, subhanallah. I'm not saying anything, but why would you be attached to Oldham? I'm just thinking that's why would you be attached to Liverpool? It's not like Oldham. But why would you be attached to such places? Or often, one thing, somebody's like Mecca, one thing in it. Or someone say Medina, one thing, or often, I got the places that you could say, I got your point, But like Oldham, Liverpool, Accrington. That's what Allah How often just keep on moving, If you find that the situation you're in is not healthy for your religion, keep on moving, keep on moving.
You mentioned a very interesting point about the malls. What happened to the Muslim?
Interesting question, isn't it? Keep on moving. They just kept moving, radiallahu anhu wa arda'ahum.
The land now looks barren and dead because once Hamid Kazim was in a vehicle with some brother that mentioned it to me, and we were going past the area, Hamid Kazim was looking outside, looking at the window at this place, and he said, go faster, get past this area. So I know for a few years that something must have happened here.
Most likely did, because you can ask a very important question. And where are those people now? How come between them and quote unquote between us, we have this sort of wall of silence as it relates to the presence of Muslims inside of Islam? Allah Ta'ala alam. You got to remember you're in a very difficult period. You're in a period of the Inquisition, That's what you're in. That period is a period of the Inquisition. And the Muslims fled with their religion, And that gripped Europe, as in general, it gripped Europe. Allah Ta'ala alam. You can find the same inside of Spain, The mountains of Spain is where they fled to. People who go to like a Rosales there inside of Spain. A Zaghara it's called. And that is a Thaghra. It was the front lines, Muslims living there inside of those mountains, inside the caves in the period of the Inquisition. The last frontiers of the Muslims themselves. And so, Allah Ta'ala alam, But there's Earth, and then there's Earth. Earth tells its own story,
Surely, from that perspective, if there were Muslims either more, surely they were stronger in Imaan,
يحيي الأرض بعد موتها.
وكذلك تخرجون. Or often, dead earth is dead there for you to bring it back to life. And earth rejoices when it's worshipped upon. I'm not advocating the most necessarily. That often that may be something else. You might Pennines move the other way or the other direction or whatever. But the point is reconnect back to the creation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I think that's the point. Any questions, inshallah ta'ala?
You mentioned placing yourself in the Sahaba's place themselves. How does the individual find the right place?
How does the individual find the right pace? And a lot of the questions, again, a question that returns back to the question yesterday, that's why teachers, I mean the true guides, right? That's why the true guides are very, very important. Religion becomes really, really difficult when we try to figure it out by ourselves. And so the true guides of religion, they're the ones who, quote unquote, show you how to pace your religion in each and every given instance, okay? In each period of time inside of your life. That's why you need those guides. Hakada the Prophet ﷺ is a guide for the companions. Hakada the companions, they're guides for the tabi'een. Tabi'een guides for the atba'a tabi'een. Hakada halum majarra. It's more so the age in which we're in. Not only have we lost guides, i.e. our connection to guides, we even denied as even guides. Are we going to figure this whole thing out from ourselves? It's strange. Like one of our teachers used to say, it's like being in the midst of a jungle, in the midst of a jungle, thickets right there, surrounded. And then there's just one path. These people of a generation have cut this path to salvation out. And you're in the midst of the jungle and there's one path there. And you're like, nah, I've got an axe. No, I'm going to do it myself, or I'm not going to go through that clear path, that straight path there. I'm going to figure my own way out of the jungle here. I'm stuck the parallel there. And how we are, whether we actually say that knowingly or unknowingly, there are people, mashallah, tabarakallah, subhanallah, are often. Those people held chains. It's like they're holding on to someone in the barzakh, we're holding someone else on. And at the end of that is Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Why would you try to traverse a path other than the path that he traversed and his people traversed? Teach us. It's really important. A lot of questions, often you sit in majalis and people ask questions, maybe over half of those questions that a person asks are solved if they have a teacher and a guide. And often, like they speak about questions outside of the context of a teacher and a guide. But if they have a teacher and a guide, khalas. No, bismillah.
So the actual physical form and spiritual, when you go through the layers of faith, do you actually get to meet Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in this life? Actually physical. You said you need a guide at the end if you ever get that far high up.
What do you mean by meet Allah? In terms of disclosure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, if you want to understand disclosure, seeing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, yes. But in the dream state, not in the wake state. That wake state is only for the Prophet ﷺ. But inside of the dream state, yes. If you understand disclosure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, is seeing the ta'thirat of his qudra, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's power now manifesting before your very eyes, and you're seeing how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he brings rain down from the heavens, how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allows leaves to fall, jalla jalaluhu ta'ala. Yes, you get the point. That's the experience of Allah, experiencing Allah Jalla fil Ula. Yeah.
Like a powerful dream or something, or like a deja vu you sometimes say. Or
Yeah.
is it more than that?
No, it's far more than that, It's far more than that. We pray that Allah Ta'ala brings us into his presence, subhanahu wa ta'ala. How can you pray? And that should likewise it makes religion easy, because what it makes easy, because a lot of times in religion, the way people have heard and understood the religion, they have no goals in religion, man. You get the point? And people don't know why they're doing what they're doing. And they don't know the recompense of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for it in this world or the next world in reality, okay? And once it becomes clear the objectives of religion, then the term would have more himma there. Human being, mash'un, becomes charged now with himma, drives him, especially in a difficult time, it drives him. Like somebody khalas on a long journey, and they know their destination, but they know they've got to go through swamps and whatever they mean, climbing, no valley too deep and no mountain too high, khalas, you understand? Ups and downs, sharra wa fitra, as he says, but it's the destination, and reaching that destination that will keep you going. Hakada, keep you going.
Share with regards to guides, how best to decide who to choose as a guide?
And how best?
Yeah.
Then Allah Alam, how best do you decide? Well, Allah Alam, Allah Ta'ala doesn't leave the sincere slave hanging. The great Sayyid Muhammad Ali al-Maliki, rahmatullah alayhi, we were blessed to be in his presence. When that type of question was asked to him, he says, salawat upon the Rasul sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. By intending what you're intending there, and making kathrat salawat upon the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, Allah Ta'ala shows you who it is. And often, even if you're in the west and he's in the east, Allah Ta'ala will show you who that person is, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will make a path for you. And often the key is turned towards him subhanahu wa ta'ala through him sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. And the reality of it, so we understand the message here, we don't choose guides choose us.
You mentioned the danger of losing religion. What are the kind of early signs of that danger? For an individual, what's the early signs?
And that relates to sensitivity of heart, or it relates to muraqabah of the limbs. The early signs of the human being, the zawahir, or the unwan al-bawatin, and the outward, are the signs of the inward. So when you see yourself, as I'm looking outwardly, you can see yourself slacking in deeds. You get the point? You see yourself slacking in prayer. You can see yourself slacking in what? In paying your zakat, or in fasting, or the acts of religion. You see yourself slacking in that regard. So when you see sort of the deeds slacking, then you can see this. Meaning, if something is decreasing, like to where, yani? You get the point? Like where's it going if it's decreasing, yani? Once the fakir, in the previous life, and whatever. Anyway, that wasn't in the previous life really. What I class the fakir, we were in America, right? So this came to mind. We were in America, in Los Angeles, right in the midst of that earthquake, the biggest in recent time in Los Angeles. We were right in that earthquake, and so we're in this hotel, and it was like the biggest hotel in like Los Angeles, and so we get inside of this lift, and like I think we were on like 15th, 16th floor or something. We press the lift, so the lift's just going up. So we're just thinking, the khalas gets 15. Then we look, it's saying 18 there. What happened? He said, did you press the button? Yeah, I pressed the button. Then press it. Press 19. Just keeps moving. 20. Keeps roughed them. One of them just started. One of them in the lift. It was there. The screen started. James Brown there, yani. Just started screaming, yani. Screaming right there, like freaking out. And then you just start seeing people in danger, yani. Because then someone else started freaking out because he's freaking out, and he's freaking out at him. So people panicking. But they're like, the point what I wanted here is that, if it's going up till where? Then what? When it reaches the top, that's the fear what was going through the time. That's what Allah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. That's what Sayyidina Umar ibn Khattab says. What goes up must come down. He says. Never is some. That's why when today I perfected your religion for you. He cried upon that verse. Sayyidina Umar ibn Khattab. Allah Ta'ala never perfects a thing save that it goes into free fall. Okay, khalas. He says, and so here the point is when we see something decrease, then we have to get rescued. So you come and rescue us out of the lift, they just stop. We have to get rescued, Daddy. We got rescued out of this lift, right? And so they take us out of this lift, and people are like, people with their life, you're like, wow. And then, we're gonna die in it. Right? We're all gonna die, yani, khalas. And we should rehearse the moment, really rehearse the moment, yani. Because the last thing, honestly, subhanAllah, the fakir often, you try and psych yourself up, you try and create scenarios of how you want to go out the world, yani. But the last thing, you don't want to go out the world, I do not want that to be my last word, and it could very well be, yani. That's what Allah. So you've got to always, that's what they say, like Ghazali, make a much remembrance of death. He said it's going over the situation of dying. 100 times a day, much remembrance of it. You're always like, okay, if this happens, what have you? You get the point. SubhanAllah. We ask Allah Ta'ala for fabat. So we come out of this lift, they rescue out of this lift, and they're taking us, like, where do we go now? Then take us to this, another lift. The man goes, screaming. He started screaming again, I was like, from a lift to another lift, and he started screaming. And so the point is, when you see the signs here, when you see the signs of the khalas, that
there's a decrease in deed till where? Araftum? When there's a sort of a decrease in your understanding of knowledge of the religion or what have you, until where does it go, yani? Araftum? When there's now the heart, the faith, the attachment, the himma, all the things, the attributes of the heart, when you find them getting less and less and less and less, to where? Because the ulama say, when they say Iman yanqus, it decreases to kufr, yani. There is a line when it goes beyond it, you're in a state of disbelief. And how many people, there are people who can tell you that story. And in the faqir, unfortunately, that's why you know, in these lands in which we lived in, there are enough people who we know who can tell us that story. And we can remember the day when, khalas, if the Mahdi had the right hand man, it was him, araftum. And then now, okay, if the Dajjal has a right hand man, it just becomes something completely different. Nasrullah salam al afiyah. Why? Important, the signs. Those signs are very, very important. Signs. When you're struggling with religion, you're still struggling with the very basis of things. That's all. Like somebody as an example, somebody an example struggling with Allah Ta'ala. Some of us, we're struggling with His wujud, with the existence of Allah Ta'ala. You better get out of Dodge, and you better get out. Whatever situation you're in, when you're having a doubt in Allah Ta'ala, in His wujud, in His existence, you're in the wrong circumstance, you're in the wrong predicament right there. You better remove yourself from it, and in cave. As if, oh, don't worry, the doubt will go. It's just not going to go in abracadabra, But often there's something that you have to do, inshallah, to put yourself in a more healthy environment, more healthy people, mashallah, tabarakallah. Anyone like Sheikh Bilal will tell you, and you go to lands, like you sit in lands, like if it's Tareem or what have you, despite yourself, man, you're like, wow. Or often your faith going somewhere, you're like, that's soaring, the faqir, we came out of majalis, and you've seen people drunk on faith, They're like, khalas, nasrullah salam al afiyah, Allah Ta'ala renders us from such people, and so environments help. People help. The states of people really, really, really help, And so you have to seek that to fortify. You find those signs in terms of Allah Ta'ala, Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam. And people have been doubting the messenger of Allah sallallahu alayhi wa sahbihi wa sallam. And it's only going to get progressively worse, Progressively worse. Somehow we think that the lands in which we're in are going to get better, But the prayer is such. And that's why, alhamdulillah, you see people of da'wah and wa'yu and irshad, that they're trying their best, inshallah ta'ala, to create environments. Alhamdulillah, we need to make a lot of dua for such people. That they do create environments, these sort of sanctuaries, in the midst of all of this sort of disturbance, where people can find, mashallah, tabarakallah, Allah ta'ala and the Rasul sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, and protect their faith, And if, we're not them, mu'een, we've got to be those who assist them, believe me. And you might think, you're seeing this out of your children then. And you'd be like, oh, I should have. Not often. Your grandchildren, great-grandchildren. It's bad times,
Talking about the wife situation. So you say about being subservient to your wife.
Are you married?
Yeah.
Good.
Because
the faqih would have had words if you weren't, but
how does that look like?
What's your name?
Shazad.
Shazad?
Yeah.
MashaAllah, Shazad. Just saying, because some of them here, some of these lads here, sallallahu salam alaihi. Go on, Shazad, no, carry on. They know who they are, You know who they are. So carry on.
How does that look like in the age of culture? So if it's seen as weak or it's seen as it's frowned upon in the age of culture. So how?
The man is the man, he's trying to say.
What?
Culture, the man is the man.
Man is meant to be the man. Even in the house, meant to be tough.
But how do we overcome that? So our deen is actually forward rather than our culture. You know what I mean? So I don't know.
Deen always has precedence here, And Allah Ta'ala alam, I'm not saying about any single culture, but if the dictates of one's culture has rendered you a true man, then fair play, If that's what you're saying, yani, you got a point? Shazam. You get the point of the fiqh, yani. If we're speaking about culture, and culture really has promoted in us true masculinity, true rujula, true manhood, then fair play to it. But if that's not what culture has did, yani, then I'm sorry, yani, it's just not a conversation. Yani. This is not a conversation. You get the point? You follow me?
No, I get it. I get it. It's just
and here, it's not that being a true man. It's like, you know, when you're playing with your, and I'm using the parallel because the Prophet says I'm using this parallel, and the Sahaba used the parallel like Umar ibn Khattab. It's like, and I'm talking in a really positive sense, it's like being with children. You get the point? Now, if you like playing with children, the child's on you and fighting with you, you can't be like, put the child in a armbar, with the child, you get the point? Yeah, I'm a true man, yeah, I'm a champion like that. You're gonna allow the child to dominate you. You get the point? But the child dominating you, you know that, yani, you get the point? If I wanted to flip the situation, I could flip the situation in a minute, yani. You understand that, yani. And so it's not like, you get the point? That's manhood, yani. It's manhood. He said, Laysa Sayyid, the Sayyid is not a ghabi. The Sayyid is not stupid. Leaders are not stupid. But they understand how to feign stupidity. You get, how can they say, the Arabs, okay? So, khalas. Shazad, yani. Are you laughing at? Yeah, it's Kashif, yani. You ain't singing today, just Bilal by himself, yani. Kashif's on the wrong side. Any questions, inshallah ta'ala? Naam. See it?
What's the move to Accrington?
No, you know, you're tempting me right now, you know. No, you're not to go to Accrington. You're tempting me to tell people about your dream. That's what i'tikaf does. Welcome to the club, yani. I'tikaf gives you the nicest of dreams, doesn't it? Wink, wink. Nah, any questions, inshallah ta'ala?
Questions about dreams?
Animals, lots of them. You want to tell them about your dream as well?
You've given us one piece of advice regarding spouse relationship. Is there anything else you advise from the deen, what the scholars have said regarding how to optimally manage a relationship with the wife?
No, it's a completely different topic.
Yeah.
Are you married?
Yeah.
When you get married? Oh yeah, yeah. How's it going?
Alhamdulillah, good. Alhamdulillah.
Is it?
Yeah.
You're in love. Actually, many, yeah. He's really class. Forget that. You're in love.
Yeah, alhamdulillah. Yeah.
Love.
Yeah.
You're much in love. Tom Nick can't divorce.
This is a means to know true love, inshallah. It's a means to know true love, inshallah.
Inshallah. That's got off the tawfiq, inshallah. Ta'ala. Bilal, bismillah. Bismillah. Aywa. You can't should come on, bismillah. Huh? You gonna sing?
قمر سيدنا النبي قمر وجميل وجميل سيدنا النبي وجميل وكف المصطفى كالورد نادي الله الله وعطرها يبقى إذا مست أيادي الله الله وكف المصطفى كالورد نادي الله الله وعطرها يبقى إذا مست أيادي الله الله وعم نوالها كل العباد وعم نوالها حبيب الله يا خير البراء يا قمرون قمرون قمر سيدنا النبي قمرون وجميل 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 سيدنا النبي وجميل ولا ظل له بل كان نورا الله الله تنال الشمس منه والبدور الله الله ولا ظل له بل كان نورا الله الله تنال الشمس منه والبدور الله الله ولم يكن الهدى لولا ظهورا ولم يكن الهدى لولا ظهورا ولم يكن الهدى لولا ظهورا وقل له الكون أنارك نوري طه قمرون قمرون قمر سيدنا النبي قمرون وجميل 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 سيدنا النبي وجميل اللهم صل وسلم وبارك عليه وعلى آله الله الله يا رسول الله 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 يا رسول الله يا رحمة لعباد الله ويا ملاذي يوم الله انظر إلينا عطفا علينا انظر إلينا عطفا علينا نحن أسأنا نحن جنينا لولاك يا أحمد ما بقينا حب الرسول باب الوصول حب الرسول باب الوصول به تنال كل المأمول ولج به باب المسؤول هذا الكريم هذا الرحيم هذا الكريم هذا الرحيم خلقه خلق عظيم وقلبه قلب سليم يا ربا ويا مولا يا ربا ويا مولا تقبل منا يا الله وافتح علينا بما ترضى
صلى الله على سيدنا محمد وسلم لحضرة النبي اللهم صل وسلم وبارك عليه وعلى آله فاتحة